Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome to the Midlife Revolution. I'm your host, Megan Connor, and today I am joined by my co-host, Jean Judson from Latter Daily Digest. Welcome, Jean.
Thanks for coming on the show and sharing this platform with Randy.
Absolutely. And we have back again, by popular demand, the wonderful Randy C. Watts. Welcome, Randy.
Oh, welcome to you guys into my home. I am so tickled to be here because you're two of my favorite people, by the way.
And you're one of my favorite people, and so is Jean.
Well,
Megan,
we're also damn cool, but you know.
That's right. Megan and I are two of my favorite people too.
And
We're
I'm
also
tickled.
joined in the studio today by many of the spirits that Randy has interacted with over the course of his career, and some of them apparently are infecting the internet.
Yeah, if there's something weird in your neighborhood, who are you going to call? Call me.
Randy.
Do I have a weird dot on my forehead by chance?
It kind of looks like the blinds are, your
From the
blinds are
blinds.
down on the window, and the sunlight from the little spaces in your blinds are maybe.
Oh, look at that, those little suckers. I'm happy to tell you that I have my delicious peanut butter coffee in hand, and
As
I'll
do
just
I.
take a quick, even the same mug.
Almost.
Wow.
Look at that.
Water.
Gene, I'm sorry, but you're kind of a loser. You just have a regular drinking glass.
That's right. I injected my coffee this morning and right directly into my veins.
That's
I
the way to do
appreciate
it.
you guys doing this morning. It's always fun for me to talk about this topic because for so long I never spoke about it, to many people because they would think that I was, I don't know, belonged on the Enquirer or something. But uh, yeah, I think we're going to touch on a few subjects that a lot of people find interesting because it's a validation and yet another evidence of some sort of life after death. I wish I had all the answers. I don't, but what I do know for an absolute fact is that something exists after death because I have had, since I was 4 years old, so many experiences. So it's kind of fun for me to discuss.
Wow, 4 years old.
Yeah. When I was four, that's when my first experience.
Oh, the spirits got him. Oh, and Jean too. Am I the only one who's moved? Oh no.
Yeah. I'm just frozen because of Randy's frozen.
Yeah. I think Randy's the only one that's frozen right now.
I don't know what possessed me. No pun intended. When I was 4 years old, um, the first experience that I ever remember was that I was I was in bed. Uh, I slept in my own room, and someone or something woke me up, knocking at the window. And I opened my eyes, and I saw this hand, and it looked green in color, but it was definitely a hand shape, and it was knocking on my window. And I jumped up and I ran into my mom and dad's room and I said, "There's there's a hand knocking on my window." And my dad says, "Oh, that's your imagination, I'm sure." And I'm like, "Okay, I've never imagined that in my life." I'm thinking with my 4-year-old brain. I said, "No, I saw a hand." And so he goes out, he looks outside and sees nothing. And he comes back in and he says, "You were probably dreaming. There's no one out there. It's probably the tree branch hitting your window." And I wasn't going to fall for that because the tree branch would not come close to my window. I didn't have any tree branches that would hit my window. I knew he was just trying to appease me. And once he left my room, I heard that knocking again. And I looked up, and there's freaking hand again on my window. And I felt like I couldn't go to my mom and dad because, they were blowing it off the first time. So I pulled the covers over my head and just put up with it. The next thing I remember, the next home we lived in, I was 8 years old.
So just to be clear, Randy, did you think that might have been Thing from the Addams Family coming back to life?
There was too much of, I could see too much of the arm for it to be the Thing.
Okay.
But I didn't know what it was, and I couldn't. I mean, I knew it was a hand, and I couldn't explain that. But time went on, and I'm in my next house, and my mom and dad made me sleep in the basement because we had, the upstairs was their master bedroom, and then all the other bedrooms were downstairs in the basement. And my sisters were of dating age because I was way younger than my sisters. And so I was always down there alone, and I hated that, but not because I was scared of the dark, not because I was scared to be alone, but when I was down in my room, I would always hear voices speaking. And once again, I did the routine where I run upstairs and I tell my mom and dad, there's people in my room. And, oh, there's no one in your room, honey. You're dreaming, or it's your imagination. Yeah, the hell it was. I'd go back downstairs and I could hear my name, and I could hear voices all the time. And that was really scary for me because I didn't have a source. I didn't understand why. And this kind of crap went on. I won't go into all the stories because that would take me all day and all day tomorrow. But this kind of stuff happened, and now I'm starting to get a little older. And at 12 years old, I saw my first. I don't know if anyone's familiar with what we call shadow figures, entities that create a shadow, but there's no actual entity. And I started seeing stuff like that. And in the interest of time, all of this is written in the book that I'm coming out with very shortly, hopefully to be completed by this fall and published by winter. But I want to tell you about one experience that, as an adult, and the reason this is interesting is because all my kids got to participate and see, what I've lived with my whole life. And I have a son, Garrett, abilities or curse, whatever you want to call it. But whenever we're together, something is going to happen, because when we're together, it magnifies times two. So when he comes to see me, we always have experiences. But
it's like you're
when I
on
lived,
the same frequency.
well, literally, exactly. Yes, it is like that. When my wife passed away, Garrett and I would see her at the same time, and we'd both look at each other. And even when she was dying in hospice, when we were waiting for her to take that last breath, we both heard her say, "Randy," from behind me. And Garrett looked up and I looked and turned around. We both turned around. No one else in the room did. And Garrett said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, yes, I did. And he said,
Wow.
she's gone. She's out of her body. That's just, reflexes of her trying to breathe. And we knew that was the case. And when she would come to see us right after she passed away, I would feel her downstairs, and the dog would see her, and because her dog just loved her to death, and he'd run up and look up at something and someone, and I would start crying and say, "I know you're here, baby." And then I could feel her. I have to use the word feel, but walking up the stairs, I sensed her. And then Garrett would say, "Dad, Melinda's here." And I said, "Yeah, I know. She was just down here." And
Wow.
that's the kind of experiences Garrett and I have had since he was born. But this one particular experience really drives home what I talk about and helps people understand. I was I ran after I left the Walt Disney Company. I ran the Peabody Hotel. I was hired away from Disney to run that hotel. Very, very haunted, by the way. But that's not what the story's about.
It's
After
an
I did
old hotel. For those who don't know, can you tell us? It's in Memphis. Is that right?
Memphis, Tennessee, it's a very famous hotel. It's where the ducks walk. The maybe you've seen on TV. They have the ducks come down from their penthouse every day in the elevator. There's a red carpet laid out for them. They climb into the fountain, and that's where they spend the day. And every day the lobby is packed, crowded, and the mezzanine upstairs. People come to see this famous duck walk. And then at 4 every afternoon, duck master comes out and gives them the command, and they hop out of the fountain, down the red carpet, into the elevator, up to the top roof where their penthouse is. And yeah, that's the Peabody Hotel.
That's
And Garrett
amazing.
and I used to explore around all the time, and there were a lot of experiences there as well. But after I left the Peabody Hotel, I I became a manager of a day spa where they did massages and blah blah blah. And uh, part of the negotiations for my salary was that they teach me massage. And so they put me through massage school as I was general manager. It's the largest day spa in the Mid South, and I managed that for about 5 years. But the time came where I decided it was time to open my own day spa, and I started looking for a location. And there in Memphis, Tennessee, you have a whole area where there's all these plantation type homes that used to have slave quarters and the whole bit. I mean, they're still very well preserved.
Colonial. They have like the pillars in front of the.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, a beautiful area. And I found one of these homes to that I thought would be perfect to open my day spa. I couldn't afford to buy it, but I could afford to lease it because there's one that came up for lease. So I called the real estate agent, and I found out that she was actually the owner of the property as well. And I explained to her what my plan was. I wanted to open a day spa downstairs and open a bed and breakfast. This was before Airbnb, but open a bed and breakfast upstairs. And the parlor and everything was just so gorgeous. And I put everything I had into the uh, conversion to make it a day spa, but to retain that beauty. And but my first experience there, we agreed on a time to meet, and uh, yeah, I remember it was Thursday at 3 o'clock. I'll never forget that time. Thursday at 3 o'clock, I went to pull into this beautiful colonial home, and she had given me the instructions to go along the side of the house, and then there's a small parking area in back where I could park. I noticed as I pulled in, there was an old African American man mowing the yard. And anyone who's been in the South, especially in Memphis, knows that there's some of these folks that have maintained that, that humble, yes, sir, no, sir type of attitude, and just very
Southern gentleman.
respectful. Yeah, exactly. And as I pulled in, I saw him mowing the yard, and I did what she said. I went around to the back of this beautiful home, and as I'm getting out of my vehicle, I saw her up in the window, and she waved, and well, she didn't wave. She just kind of nodded at me, but I waved like I'll be right there. And she looked at me, and then she walked over to the next window and looked out at me still. And I said, "Coming." So I went down the driveway to go in the front door, and this old gentleman, his name was Mr. Henry, he says, "Can I help you, sir? You must be Randy." And I said, "Yeah, I am. I'm here to talk with Cheryl." And he says, "Oh, Cheryl, she'll be here. She says she's going to be a little bit late." And I said, "Oh, no, she's here now." And he said, "No, she's not here yet. Ain't nobody in that house." And I said, "Well, there's somebody in there," because they just waved to me.
And you
Or
went
I
back.
waved to them, and they nodded, and they went to the other window. And I said, "So someone's in there. Would you mind if I went in and started to look around?" He said, "Oh, I ain't got no key to that. Miss Cheryl, she's the only one with the key." And he says, "There ain't nobody in that house." And then he looked at me. That's really struck me the way he said it. He says, "Mr. Randy, is you one that sees?" And I said, "What?" He says, "My daughter, she's one that sees. You's one that sees." And I said, "Are you talking about?" He says, "Ghostus." And I said, "Well, actually, I've had many experiences in my life. Are you telling me that there's no one in that house?" He said, "Ain't nobody in that house."
Wow.
So just then, this big long Cadillac pulls into the driveway, and it's Cheryl. And I said, "Hey, Cheryl, I'm Randy." And I said, "There's someone in your house." And she chuckles. She says, "No, there's no one in there. I've got the only keys." And in Memphis, Tennessee, you want to keep your property locked because it's not the best place in the world for, crime.
Vagrants.
Yeah. So I said, "Well, I'll show you because I know exactly what room she's in." So she just kind of blew that off and parked her car and walked me up to the front door, and we started walking in. And I says, "Can I just show you that there's someone in here?" And I could tell where I needed to go to get to that upstairs room that she was looking out of. And I went up to the room and I said, "There was someone just right here looking right down at my car." And then, and I looked and I'm like, "Well, she walked right over to the next window, but there was a wall between those two windows." I'm like, she walked right directly to the next window and was looking out at me. And she I could tell that in her mind, she was rolling her eyes. Anyway, I told her what I wanted to do, and she was she thought this would be a good idea and it'd be great for her property. And she actually wanted to kind of go in on the Airbnb part, I mean, the bed and breakfast part. And I said, "Yeah, we'd love your help if you want to help with that," because she still had all the antique furnishings and all that. In order for us to change the zoning to a partial commercial so that we could move in and move my business in, we had to have a neighborhood meeting. And the meeting took place across the street. There's all these widows. Almost all of the ladies that lived in these big homes were widows. And they had a tea group that they'd get together all the time anyway. And so Cheryl contacted them and asked if we could come join their tea group and explain what we wanted to do and get their thumbs up, their vote on that. And that was arranged. We met the next week and sat down, and here's all these elderly, kind Southern women. And it was just like right out of a movie. And Cheryl told them first what I had planned and what I wanted to do. And then I kind of, added to it that this is my plan. This is how we want to make sure there's not too much traffic. There's a parking area in the back, and we won't have too many guests at the same time. And Cheryl broke in and says, "Randy loves the place. He even thinks he saw a ghost in there," laughing at me. And none of the women laughed. They said, "Oh, you must have seen Miss Dudley." And I'm like,
Oh,
"Who's Miss Dudley?" And they said, "Oh, she's the lady that lived there before. We all knew her. She was our friend." We would see her all the time, but we still see her now. And even though she passed, we see her in the windows quite frequently. And I looked over at Cheryl like, who are you laughing at now? But anyway, so
Outvoted.
so now I realized who this was, and the story was that her husband had died of emphysema, and he died in the home upstairs, and she was so distraught that she killed herself downstairs, and that's how she passed. So, oh, and they said, just in case you're wondering, she was a big, big tennis fan. And I took that to note. I said, they said, if you ever see any evidence of hear tennis balls or anything like that, I said, okay. So the renovations started, and I noticed the distinct feeling that I would always get if there were spirits present. That's something that comes along with the gift that I'm telling you about. It's a gift that even police departments have had me go into scenes to see what I could feel and see if there was any activity spirit wise in there. And I would get this feeling very strongly, and it wasn't a malevolent feeling. It was actually a very warm, benevolent feeling that whoever this Miss Dudley was, she seemed to be a very friendly individual, and I could feel that warmth as I would work there. But I started to experience things that, it's still a little spooky. I'm there alone at night, and I start having things like a shower turn on. I installed a bell in our big jacuzzi room that I created so that when people were done with their jacuzzi, they could ring this bell. And instead of a bell, it sounded like birds tweeting, and that would be the sign for my employees, the assistants, to take them towels and robes and have them go to their massage rooms. And I remember walking in and feeling this feeling very strongly. I said, Miss Dudley, I'm here alone at night. It is a little creepy for me. So kind of go easy on me, would you? And all of a sudden the lights went out. And then they flipped back on. I'm like, see, now you're doing it right now. And I
That's the
my
opposite of what I
pager,
wanted.
yeah, that's exactly what I didn't want. And then my pager went off. This was back in the days of pagers, not cell phones. And I looked, and something I'd never seen, it was all zeros. And it went off. And so I had no one to call because I didn't know anyone with the number of 0000000. And that went off. And then just as I sat down to do my paperwork, I start hearing the birds tweet in the jacuzzi room. Now, mind you, I'm completely 100% alone. I'm like, okay, do you not want me here tonight? Because I was done for the night. I wasn't going to do it. It's still, it's not that I can't be afraid of ghosts, but just because I have experiences with them. And I said, okay, that's it. And the lights flickered as I went to walk out, and I'm like, no, I'm done. And I actually developed this rapport with Miss Dudley that she would almost say hello to me when I'd come walking in.
I'm thinking she just wanted a towel and to get ready for her massage. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, stay tuned. So the rumors began as we made these renovations that this place was very haunted. And I wasn't gonna dispute any of this because it actually is good for publicity. I figure, hey, if people think it's haunted, there's a lot of people that will be drawn to this place. But I
Called
sure didn't.
Mystics Massage.
Yeah. I didn't start any rumors about it. I'm not the one that did it, but word travels really quick when things like this happen. My employees, you know, I only had one employee at the time because we were just getting going, and her only job was to answer the phones and do a little dusting and clean up until we opened, which she'd be working there for a few months before we opened. And lo and behold, the news station called me there in Memphis, one of the main news stations, and they said, "Hey, we'd like to interview you." And by the way, I started doing radio commercials. I called my day spa. Um, uh, I'm having a little senior moment here. But my whole theme was Adam and Eve. So all of my advertising was geared towards Adam and Eve and conversations between the two of them. And so the radio station uh, is connected to the news station, and a couple of the news gals came up and asked if maybe they could come interview me. And I said, "Yeah, you're welcome to come to Eden." It was Eden Day Spa and bed and breakfast. I said, "You're welcome to come to Eden and have an interview. When would you like to do it?" And they set up a time. It was in the evening. I said, "Okay." And one of them says, "I hope Miss Dudley makes an appearance." And I said, "Oh, you've heard about Miss Dudley, huh?" And she says, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, watch what you wish for," because it's not impossible. So anyway, they came and we sat down in the parlor there, and they began to interview me. And I'll have to say that every door was locked up. There were only two doors. There's a big, beautiful, grandiose front door, and then there was a smaller back door leading out to the back patio. And everything was locked up. When the news people got here, I opened the door and let them in, these two anchors, shut the door and locked the door behind them. Sitting in place right beside the door was our brand new washer and dryer. There were commercial washer and dryer, because that's where all the linen would be done for the massages, the facials, the body treatments, all we did downstairs in the day spa. Locked the door up, and we walked into the parlor and began to visit. Oh, I took them on a little tour of upstairs and all that. And after we visited for about 2 hours, it was a long interview. One of them said, "Oh, I was kind of hoping that Miss Dudley would make an appearance." And I said, "Well, it's not something you can predict, but she pulls all kinds of shenanigans, and I think I have a good relationship with her." And we stood up. We went to walk out that small door, and this brand new commercial washer and dryer were no longer beside the door, but they were pulled out right in front of the door and blocked the exit door. And they weren't plugged in, by the way. It's not like they could start up and crawl themselves. And for someone to drag them, it would have been very noisy because it was just right in the next room.
And those things are heavy.
Yeah, they are. And they're like, who would do this? And I said, "Well, hello. There's only one other person that's in here that's not us." And I said, "That's Miss Dudley." And the one got kind of excited. The other one was petrified. I said, don't be afraid, and they helped me, and we wobbled these things back in place. And I opened the door, and they went down and got in their vehicle. And I shut the door and locked it behind. And I went to just turn the lights off and everything, and I hear a knock at the door, and I came out, and they said, "We need your help." Now, there's something I didn't tell you, is that every time anyone pulled into this parking lot, especially me, and went back out, The radio station that I was listening to in my vehicle was now on a Spanish station. And they came back and they said, we're wondering if someone we're confused because, we're very careful about locking our vehicle. And they had a news vehicle there, and they said it's still locked, but the door's open. It's ajar, but the lock is still locked. And I said, well, that's pretty crazy. And they said, and another thing, we were listening to our radio station, and now it's on a Spanish station. Do you think someone broke into my car? I said, no, because they broke in, they couldn't still have the door locked. So I helped him, this was back in the days before the fobs, but I helped him they couldn't shut the door now because it was locked and the key wasn't going to work. So I got a screwdriver, and I had done this before for guests because this was another thing that Miss Dudley did, was she would open the doors somehow with them still locked and change the stations to a Spanish station. And
which is haunting for a lot of people.
I see what you did there. And I sent them on their way. I had to take a drink of my delicious peanut butter coffee. So my kids came to work with me one day. Now, mind you, we still hadn't opened up. And my son, Randy Tyler, he's my Navy SEAL son, big tough kid, and he was downstairs in the parlor area, and I was just in the office, which was there in the kitchen area. And all of a sudden we hear bouncing, and him and I are the only ones there at the time. And there's boing, 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 and this ball came bouncing down the stairs, and he just came tearing into my office and like, Dad, there's a ball that just bounced down the stairs. It's Miss Dudley. And I said, well, she's playful. That's okay. I had the carpet installers come in, and they were, they told me, they said, look, we'll install your carpets for you, but you have to be here because we've heard what goes on in here. And these are two tough carpet guys, I'm like, guys, there's nothing scary about it, and they probably won't bother you. It's just Miss Dudley. And I said, there's one other spirit that resides, but we haven't heard much about him. And they said, okay, but you need to stay close. I said, I have to run to the bank. Other than that, I'll be here. And okay. So, they get doing their thing. And I told them, I said, guys, I'll be right back. I'm running to the bank. I went to the bank. I came back, and they're both out in the front yard doing this. And the guy said, I told you to stay here. And I said, what's going on? And he says, you said we were the only ones in here, and there's some guy upstairs coughing. And I said, oh, yeah, well, he did manifest himself. This was the guy that had died in the home upstairs from emphysema. And he said, dude, he doesn't stop coughing, and we are not going back in there. And I'm like, guys, I have to have you finish the carpet job, please. And they're like, so I stood right there with them as they finished up the carpet job. The time finally came where it's about time to open up the spa and the bed and breakfast. And our first guests had an incredible experience. Their only problem was the guy that was coughing upstairs that was keeping them awake. And they said, we thought we were the only guests. And I said, well, you are the only living guests in the place. And I said, I'm sure you've heard the rumors. They said, yeah, but we didn't think that we'd actually experience anything. But this guy coughing was very disturbing to them. And then when it was time to open the day spa up, my massage therapist, I had 3 massage therapists, me being one of them, because I had gone to massage school as part of the deal to work for that other spa. And she set her room all up very nicely. And when she came to work the next day, she had to wait for me to let her in because I had the keys, you know. I went into my office, she went into her room, and then she comes out and she's like, "What? Did you do this?" And I said, "Did I do what?" And I walked into the room and her massage table was upside down. All of her books, because she had a bunch of books on the shelf, were piled up on the floor beside the table.
No human could do that.
No
Well, now
human would
Dean, you
stack
have to
books like
remember,
this.
you have to remember, I'm the one. I had the keys to the kingdom. No one else had the keys, and plus it was alarmed, by the way. And she said she knew that it was Miss Dudley. She's like, she better not do this every morning because that's a pain in the ass to set these things up again. There was an employee that I had who was she was, well, she was like a model. I mean, she was incredibly gorgeous. And I'm no dummy. I know that to have a receptionist, you know, when people come in, that looks like she's been to a day spa, and, you know, you want to have a pleasant, I'll call her the vice
Introduction.
president of first impressions, you know. I asked her, I said, you know, we're just getting started and you don't have a whole lot to do. I wonder if you would mind just dusting, you know, because there's still a lot of dust settling and things. So if you get here before I do, if you wouldn't mind just dusting and keeping things neat, and because people sit in the parlor after their services. Well, she didn't want to. She didn't want to work. It ends up that yes, she was beautiful, but she wouldn't get up and she wouldn't pull her weight. Let's just say that. She thought that her looks would get her through. And I said, listen, I really need you to help out here because I don't have someone to, you know, I just need you to stay busy when you're not answering the phone and when you're not welcoming people in. She didn't do it. And I was wasting money having her. I needed someone who would help out along with being the receptionist. But I didn't want to fire her. Uh, I was very hesitant to do that because I'd become friends with her. And it was a bit of a dilemma. Well, I went to work, um, you know, shortly after I'd come to this decision. And when I pulled up, she was sitting out on the front porch, crying her eyes out. She, by the way, as the receptionist, was able to get into the place. I had finally given her a key, and she was able to get in and start her work. And she was crying, and she says, "I can't do this anymore. I quit." And I'm like, "What is going on?" She says, "I was dusting like you told me, and I was there by the bookshelves, and someone pulled my hair hard, and I thought it was you. And I turned around and said, 'Randy,' and there was nobody there. And she said, 'My hair is still mussed. You can see it.' And she
Wow.
said, I know it's Miss Dudley, and I can't do this anymore. And I'm sorry, Randy. I'm so sorry, but I quit." And after she walked out, I'm like, "Thank you, Miss Dudley. She took care of it for me." And
Miss Dudley must not have liked her very much.
we had this relationship, and we had, you know, we had a room where all the manicures and pedicures took place, and the hand, whatever they do, the hand nail treatments. And my esthetician was taking care of one of her clients in the room, and I walked in, and we always would serve champagne and chocolate dipped strawberries to all of our clients who would come in. It was that kind of establishment. The lady said, "Randy, I just can't tell you how much I love your place, but I'm a little pissed off because I haven't seen Miss Dudley yet, and I'm here every other week. And I'm not kidding, not 2 seconds went by, and her champagne glass was at one end of the table, so as not to be in the way, moved all the way across the table in front of all of us, the esthetician, her, and I, moved all the way to the edge of the table. And if that wasn't enough, then the shower started up in the room right adjacent to that. I said, "You happy now?" And she goes, "Oh, I'm happy now. I'm happy." And she hollered out, "Thank you, Miss Dudley." Anyway, so Miss Dudley played a big part in my life because that was a validation for me that it wasn't all just, as I was growing up, it wasn't my imagination. And the experiences that I had as a 12-year-old and moving on, we'll discuss those one day. But this is just one example of the types of experiences I've had. And my son Garrett has taken on this responsibility or blessing or curse as well.
Oh yeah,
And he
before
has these
you
experiences.
get to this story, I was just going to say, if you had a ghost from every century in that house, you could sue the TV program Ghosts for stealing your idea.
Well, that's a great idea, Gene. Thank you.
So yeah, Garrett has had some wonderful opportunities with this ability.
Well, I actually let my kids feel what it was like. I went to purchase a property when I first moved here to Spokane, Washington. Most of the properties were, rather benign, but this one that I looked at was just buzzing with evil. And my daughter and my son came to see this place that I was going to buy. And I said, "Do you want to know what it feels like? What I have been going through my whole life?" And I took him upstairs and I said, "Just sit here in the quiet and tell me what you feel." And my daughter actually said, I feel like there's a real uncomfortable wet blanket wrapped around me. And I said, "Yeah, that's the feeling of evil." And I took him back downstairs um,
So
because I
would that
wanted
make a
them to
good
experience.
would that make a good Airbnb called Buzzing with Evil, or would it make a bad Airbnb?
That's I considered that. I considered maybe finding a place that was haunted. Um, because normally I don't have to find haunted places to experience things. The home that I first purchased here in Spokane, Washington, and by the way, Spokane is full of ghosts, stories, experiences. Haunted Spokane is a book that explains why it's so haunted. There's been so much death in Spokane, Washington. There's a
I'm going
lot
to
of
start calling
haunted,
it Spookan, Washington.
right? Well, that's something that a lot of people call it, a Spokane, because there's so many ghost things. We have the Thousand Stair Cemetery, where news station after news station have been there because there's so many sightings of ghosts walking up and down these stairs. They call it the Thousand Stairs. It's not 1,000 stairs, but it seems like it if you're walking up and it's haunted. And I know we're probably running short on time now, but I will kind of wrap this up uh, to with a quick thing about my son Garrett. He Walt Disney recently allowed him to go into the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland alone. They have never let an influencer go into one of their attractions alone. But Garrett's been doing a lot of promo work for him, and this last video he made, he went in alone with his, I say alone, but with his cameraman and producer. And they didn't find anything haunted in the Haunted Mansion. But I will tell you that in the hotel, and you can visually watch what I experience and what Garrett experiences. Because when his cameraman had to run back to LA to do something and he was going to come back the next morning, the light behind him that was shining up, it was a sconce light, slowly moved down as he was talking. And they got a picture of a figure of a little girl who's purported to walk that hotel. Because the hotel employees, when they saw Garrett Watts, they said, "Are you here to investigate this hotel?" And Garrett's like, "No, I'm here to go through the haunted mansion." And there was a big uh, uh, content creator convention that Garrett was a guest at. But it's funny that the haunted experience that he had was in his hotel room once his cameraman left. This sconce slowly twists and moves down as he's talking. And the light, when he's talking about the spirit of this little girl that they caught on film, the light behind him just flips off and then flips back on. And he says, did y'all see that? Did you see the timing of that as I'm talking about this little girl? So that's the kind of thing that we go through all the time. There's a million of these ghost stories. I call them ghost stories, but spiritual experiences for me that I could tell you. But I know that our time is up. But I can't really tell. What's that?
How much time does Megan have?
I have about 10 more minutes.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll quickly tell you my first experience here in Spokane. When I moved here, I purchased a home, 1949 home in a neighborhood that was, well, I won't tell you yet, but it was a nice neighborhood. And the homes are all fairly old. And one of the first things that happened was it was ice cold. We moved there the day before Thanksgiving. I remember that specifically because I wanted to have my kids over for Thanksgiving dinner. And we put together a kind of a rough Thanksgiving dinner, just barely moving there, but it was fun. And I got to show them the house and everything. My girlfriend had moved to Spokane with me. And in retrospect, that was a big mistake, but she wanted to come with me. And so, excuse me,
you're
I said,
haunted
that's
by
okay.
you're haunted by live people sometimes too as well.
Yeah, in that case, yes. But anyway, her mother came along to help us unpack and get the household all set up and ready. And the first morning that we were there after we had our Thanksgiving dinner, it was cold, it was snowy, and I went into the bathroom to, brush my teeth. You know what you do first thing in the morning. I got up, I was the first one up, and I went to brush my teeth. And midway through brushing my teeth, the water cut off. And I was an Arizona boy. I didn't know anything about ice and snow, but what I did know is that if your pipes freeze, that's a
Bad
bitch.
news.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh no. I hurried and flushed the toilet to see if that worked, and it flushed once because of the water in the tank, but then nothing was filling it. The water was off. I'm like, oh, I started calling. I woke everyone up. I said, if you have to pee, you're going to have to do it in the downstairs bathroom and wait until everyone's done. Well, there are only three of us in the house, but you ladies wait until you're both done and then flush the toilet. Otherwise, you're going to be out of luck. And I called every plumber I could think of, and I paid a premium to have this guy come. It was just after Thanksgiving. He was still on his Thanksgiving holiday. And to get him there instantly, I said, look, our pipes are frozen up. And he tested all the faucets, and none of them worked. And he started doing what he normally does to unclog and starts heating the pipes and all that. And he put these special electrical clamps on the pipes that heat the pipes up, and he left them there all day. But after he first put the clamps on, he came back up and he said, "Is there a radio on or something downstairs?" And I said, "No. Let me guess, you hear old music, right?" He says, "Yeah, it's like there's a radio on playing big band music." And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's what my girlfriend's mother says. She was down there unpacking and she could hear like old timey music." And he's like, "Yeah, something has to be on." I'm like, "No, I don't even have a radio." Didn't think a whole lot about it. And he came downstairs, or he says, "I'm going to leave and go to a few other calls. I'll come back after these pipes have had a chance to thaw, but I guarantee you they'll be thawed out by the time I get back with this heater on them." So he left and he was gone like 4 or 5 hours. And we're all sitting in the family room and he goes downstairs to work on it. And he came back up and he said, "I don't want to alarm you folks, but do you believe in ghosts?" And I said, "Well, actually, yeah, I do." He said, "There's something going on in this house because your pipes are not frozen." I said, "They're not?" He said, "No, and they never were." He said, "Can you come down and let me show you something?" I went downstairs and he lifted the panel, tile roof, one of those roof panels in our basement. He lifted that up to expose the pipes. And there on one of the pipes was a valve, some kind of an emergency valve type thing that it had.
Emergency shut off.
Yeah, it wasn't the regular water inlet valve from the street. It was some kind of a shutoff thing. He says, "Did you know this was here?" And I said, "No, I've never even seen one of those before." He said, "Well, it takes a wrench to turn it." And he said there were cobwebs and dust everywhere, no fingerprints, nothing. But this was turned all the way closed. And I'm like, "Wait, how could that be?" And he said, "Dude, the only explanation is that you've got a ghost in here. Because it's not, it took me an effort to turn it with a wrench. And if you did a Thanksgiving dinner here, you would never have been able to even use your sink." And I'm like, "Okay, well, thank you for letting me know." And he says, "And that music keeps coming and going that I'm telling you about." He said, "Dude, I've never been a huge believer in ghosts, but you have ghosts in this house." And that was the beginning of a series of experiences in that home. And I don't know if it's because I just happened to pick the right places or wrong places, or if it's because I'm open. And I really believe this is the reason, because I'm open and I understand and I have a very clear uh, reception pathway, I guess, to spiritual activity. And they know that I can feel and hear them and see them. And so I'm the one that they choose to manifest themselves to.
Well, you've
This house
spent a
is,
lot of time, serving families when they've lost loved ones, and you have a great deal of compassion. And so, whatever people believe about spirits and spiritual activity and things like that, I think it's very clear that you have an affinity for being sensitive to these things.
you're right. Thank you. And for some reason, it's kind of a hereditary thing. My other kids don't experience the same things, but Garrett does. And next time we chat, I'd love to tell you about what the experiences that I had after my wife Melinda passed away. Some of the incredible things that made me know that she's still around, and
Yeah.
um, just blatant communication with both Garrett and I. And we'll talk
Can I
about that
ask?
maybe.
Yeah. So where is Garrett in the birth order?
Garrett's the baby of the family. I have 4 kids, and Garrett was my 4th.
And how old
Yeah,
was he
that's
when
where he
Melinda
is.
passed?
Yeah, he would have been about 15. Yeah.
And did he experience any kind of these sensations or viewings or things prior to Melinda passing?
Nope. It all
Mm,
started with Melinda.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll definitely
I
have
was
to have you back again to talk about all of that.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable, and I understand that there's going to be a lot of people listening to the show, and I get it. I truly understand that they're going to say he's full of it. This is not true. I get it. I would think the same thing probably,
You're not
but I
trying
can.
to start a religion based on these things or charge tithing or anything like that. You're just sharing your experiences.
There will be no baptisms into the Church of Randy. I guarantee it. But
But I'm thinking that if you wrote scripture, you would say, love one another, or the ones you don't will haunt you.
yeah, right. Yeah. No, it got so, my experience is so prolific that, you know, I told you I actually have received calls from crime scenes to go and see what I feel and what I pick up. I've had the opportunity to meet several of the world's most famous mediums, James Van Prague and Miss Dubois. A lot of these people, the mediumship thing, we'll talk about that in another show. But anyone who thinks that dead people can't communicate with the living need to sit down with me for an hour, and I will tell them things that make them realize, oh my gosh, it's real.
Yeah, you'd make
So
a great Boy Scout leader around the campfire on Friday night.
well, my stories aren't necessarily the scary kind,
That's right.
although on my mission, okay, that's a whole different ball game with evil spirits. um, I could fill up another show and for a week with the evil spirit situation that was in my mission that I got to experience, and that's terrifying for me. But
Yeah.
yeah, I have a lot to tell y'all, and next time we do this, I'll be happy to share some more of these experiences. But I am so appreciative to both of you for allowing me this platform to say to tell some of these experiences that I typically don't tell people
That's
because
right.
it
And
can
when
be
you
kind
buy
of
Randy's book, you won't need to read chapter 4 about Miss Dudley.
right.
It's that.
You'll
There,
already
there
know
is
it.
there's a chapter dedicated to Miss Dudley, actually. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Of course. And Randy, I would like to officially invite you to San Antonio. I know that we've talked about visiting each other before, but San Antonio is a place of spirits as well. Given that the Alamo is here and the famous Fairmont Hotel is a haunted hotel. And there is a rumor about some railroad tracks down on the south side of San Antonio that if you sprinkle baby powder on the back of your car and you put your car in neutral, that the children who died in the bus will push your car over the tracks and then you'll have handprints on the back of your car. So we'll have to try out some of these things down here in San Antonio.
Maybe get
I've
Garrett
seen
to film it.
videos of that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm sure Garrett would, if I tell him what you just told me, I'm sure he would love to come along.
Oh,
So
yes.
yeah,
I'd love to have you
I'll,
both. I'll show you a good
I'll,
time. I'll make you some green chili enchiladas.
how could we beat that? And Lori Vallow style?
No, they will be
Better.
my unforgettable green chili enchiladas.
Okay. Well, we couldn't refuse that offer, so I'll let Garrett know. He'll watch this anyway. So thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Randy. We appreciate you so much.
I
So,
appreciate y'all.
so I can close it out by saying thanks everyone for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Do the things, and we'll have Randy on more. And Megan, you have to be out right now, and so
I do. I have an appointment. So thank you, Jean, for putting this together.
We'll excuse you, but we'll let your viewers also know that I'll talk with Randy for about 15 more minutes about some of the higher level things to expect when you see. So we'll see you.
I can't wait. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Bye, Megan.
So I was thinking, Randy, that we can talk in detail more of your stories in another episode. But I was thinking that we could get not like a timeline, sort of a high level thing, but I was thinking that one thing would be good is how the story of how you became of interest to law enforcement, where people would invite you to check out a crime scene to see if you sense anything.
It was when I would receive calls to crime scenes, it usually wasn't from the law enforcement office. It usually wasn't the police officers or the detectives. However, if they knew me, then it would be. It was from the owners of the homes in which the crime was committed. A well-known case, Jodi Arias, who slaughtered her boyfriend, and that happened in Mesa, Arizona.
Around 7 years ago?
Oh, no, it was longer than that.
Longer?
It's been
12 years ago?
Been longer than that. It's probably been about 15, 16 years ago. Because it was before I moved here to Spokane, and I've been here since 2013. So I've been here for 9. Oh, wait a minute. 2013. So I've been here 12 years, 13, 14. Yeah, so it's probably 14, 15 years ago. And the owners of the home where the crime took place kept seeing something walking down their hallway. And it was really scaring them, because when you have a violent crime take place in your home, you want to find out who's still lingering there.
Right.
And they
in
called.
June of 2008, Jodi Arias murdered her ex-boyfriend, Travis Alexander. It was 12 years ago that she was convicted. That's what I had in mind.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. So, the news crews and everything were still there, still trying to get into the house. And the owners had heard about this thing that, I do. I never did it for money, but if people would ask me, I was happy to respond and tell them what I experienced. And she hired 2 people, a shaman who was known for his abilities with the deceased, and me. They brought these 2 people in. I don't know if the shaman charged or not, but I did it because it's just what I do, and I would never want money for my abilities like this.
Right. And I think that Megan wants to do like a whole show on the Jodi Arias situation with you as part of it, given your like piece of this story, right? How you can add value to that show, because I know it's have something to do with her murder intersecting personality disorders and maybe religion here and there.
She was a very scary individual, and coincidentally enough, my son Andrew was friends with what was his name? Travis. Travis, the guy that was slaughtered in that home. He and my son were friends. So
Travis
that was just
Alexander.
Yeah,
Travis Alexander.
And that was just a coincidence that I didn't even know about at the time all this was happening. But until I told my son Andrew what I was doing, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, I knew him. I knew Travis. They were in the same whatever ward, young singles ward or whatever." And but anyway, yeah, I walked past the newscasters, and they all wanted to know how I could get into the house, and I'm like, well, I've been asked, you know. And I walked up into the bedroom where it all occurred, and I asked for the family not to disturb me, for the everybody not to disturb me, just leave me there alone. And I sat in there for about 45 minutes and just felt what I could feel. And with the home being quiet, it was a lot easier for me to let things, you know, come to me. And what I got the very strong impression that what was in the home was nothing evil of any kind, because that I can feel instantly. But I felt a warm feeling, and I felt that it was Travis walking up and down the hallways with all this activity in his home, because this was his place. Um, I felt that he was checking his little kingdom, that he was watching over it. Even though he had left, he took a lot of pride in his home because he was young for owning his own home, especially in a nice neighborhood like this. And I conveyed to the family, I said, look, I feel Travis's presence. I think that he's watching over his home and making sure that it's not destroyed any further. And not that he could do anything about it, but I think for his own comfort, he wants to know that his home is in good hands. And I said, I feel like there's no negative energy connected to this. And she said, oh my gosh, that's exactly what the shaman told us, that it was Travis that we see the shadows and things walking down the hallway. I said, yeah. Well, if we both feel that same thing, you can be pretty certain that that's exactly what the case is. And then, you know, other times where there were possible intrusions where people couldn't explain the noises, the things tipped over in their homes, they'd ask if I would come in. And I'd always ask them the same thing, just give me a little while alone with quiet. You know, I mean, they can be in the home, but they need to be very still. And, you know, and I report to them what I feel and what I don't.
Yeah. Do you, when did you first start telling either a fellow officers or other people about your things? I mean, were you want to be on stakeouts, or would people say, hey, I heard from some other common law enforcement friend you said something about seeing dead people or whatever? And how does that word spread?
You know, it was all word of mouth. As a matter of fact, one of the cases was because of my massage therapist who knew all about this, because, you know, I'd chat during a massage, and she knew so many people, and she would tell them if she ever heard of anything where people needed some help like this, she would tell them, and it just kind of spread like that. You know, it's not like I was busy all the time doing it. There was just a few cases where I was happy to go in and tell them what I felt in their home, and you know, if I felt anything malevolent, because people typically don't care too much if it's not an evil spirit. With me, I can tell instantly when I walk into a room, like I think I was mentioning the the place here in Spokane that I walked into to show. I wanted my daughter and son to feel what evil felt like.
Do you
And
feel that you can either walk somewhere with sort of like a clean slate or a blank page or whatever, and just let whatever happens? Or do you sometimes try to actively sense things? Because that's like, if you get invited, you're trying to do that. If you just walk into some place just because it's a business transaction or something, I'm
I
wondering,
don't.
I'm wondering almost if you could, if you want to get some stuff done, if you can start to sense some spirits, and can you just say, hey, I got business to do, I don't want to mess with you, and then you can just move on and sign the contracts or give the pitch or something like that, and not be bothered by that. And it's like, I'll come back later and you can talk to me.
I do talk with them all the time. If I feel something in my home here, which the great stories here too, but nothing haunted. But I typically don't go with any preconceived notions. I like to go in with a totally blank sheet. And when most of these occur, it's not when I'm expecting something to happen. It just comes right out of the blue, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's a spirit here, and sometimes I know what that spirit wants to convey, and sometimes I can just feel their presence. And
About how long ago did you think about writing your experiences as a book? I mean, have you been
when I
thinking about
wrote,
it for years, or
well, here's the deal: when I wrote "Feeling Empty," one of the chapters in there is called "Love Notes from Heaven." "Feeling Empty" was the book that I wrote when my wife passed away, and it. Oh yeah, there you go. And I wrote that to help people who were having to overcome grief, in hopes that they wouldn't do what I wanted to do, which was take my own life or turn to drugs and drinking, because it was so difficult for me. And I wrote "Feeling Empty," and one of the chapters was "Love Notes from Heaven," about the experiences that I had with Melinda's passing. And I included some other people's experiences in there, but mostly mine. And that is the chapter that really, I think, piqued the interest of readers. And this wonderful man that I considered him like an adopted grandfather. He was a dear friend of mine, and he'd ask me all the time, because he was getting up in age and he knew he'd be passing before long. And he'd ask me all the time to tell him about some of my experiences. And it was a validation for him that there really was life after death. And he said, listen, what I'd really love you to do is write. And he was an author as well. He said, I'd love you to write these experiences down that you've had, for people like me who want to know that there's a life after death. And I said, well, Frank, you know that I'll never convince people, but if it helps people like you to validate that there is, I think that's a good idea. And people loved the chapter "Love Notes from Heaven" because it helps them to realize that their loved ones, haven't gone too far, and that they still are able to communicate. And next time we chat, we'll talk about mediumship and how that helped me a great deal. But it was it was just a few years ago that Frank passed away, and we had had a pact that if I died first, I would manifest myself to him, and if he died first, he'd manifest himself to me. And he held up his end of the deal. I received a very special visit, and I didn't even know he had passed away. His daughter was still making the notifications, and he had died in Mesa, Arizona, and I saw him through my window sitting here at my desk where I am right now. And I'm like, that, what was that? And then the next day I get the notification that Frank had passed away. Um, so really, in honor of him, that's why I'm writing this next book. Um, the name of it now is Encounters with Spirit, but that might change, depending on how I feel when I'm done writing it. But, it's just a book of experiences like I've shared with you today. Not only me, but other people's experiences too. So it's not a total vanity book. There will be others' experiences too that, I interview people and talk to a lot of people about, tell me about your ghostly encounters. And they're happy to do that. So.
And I wonder if when you write the book that more stories will come in, and you could write a follow-up where it's mostly about everybody else's stories.
Almost everybody I tell about what I'm doing says, Oh, I have an experience I should share with you.
Try it.
It's amazing the number of people that have actually had an experience of what they consider to be um, a spirit or a ghost or a deceased person.
That's right.
It almost cheapens it to call them ghost stories,
Right.
because that sounds like what you were saying, sitting around the campfire as a Boy Scout. It's not ghost stories. It's I consider them very spiritual experiences.
Right. Not scary, just life affirming in a way, post earthly life affirming to you and others.
Yeah, and there are a few experiences during my funeral home employment that I think people will find interesting too. In
But
the
nobody
next show
comes
we do.
back and says, hey, buy whatever the equivalent of Apple stock. That'll be a good tip.
I wish.
Maybe
I wish that were the
don't know
case.
the future, or maybe their financial information is off their radar.
I think typically what they're trying to do is communicate to somebody that they're still around. And
Right. But I'm just putting it out there to the ghosts. If you have any, like, what horse is going to win the next Preakness or something like that, get a hold of Randy. And Randy, if you do, tell me, and we'll make a little money on it.
We can give that a shot. To the best of my knowledge, the ghosts don't tell the future. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
It's just a thought, in case in the manual somewhere, like in the footnote, the ghost manual.
It's not a bad thought. Yes. But you know that every time you and I interview someone who's in the next day, like Diamond Dave and some of these that live.
Oh, yeah. On the other side of the international date line.
Yeah, I always want the lottery numbers. It's like, hey, since you're tomorrow, what is tonight's lottery numbers? But I guess it doesn't.
When I was in Bangkok getting this shirt, there was an eclipse
nice shirt
that was happening, and people were wondering if Jesus would return during that eclipse last April, and I did a broadcast at what would have been 11 p.m. or something Bangkok time, but it was still like noon or whatever in America somewhere. And I said, this day's almost over. No sign of Jesus yet. And I'm going to predict that he doesn't show. I'm just going to say, if he doesn't come in my day, your day probably won't happen either. The day that I experienced.
And that had to make you feel so good that you called it, man. You were right on.
He didn't come, did he? That's a checkbox, a check mark for me. So
you should let the church administration know that, if they ever need you to fly to Bangkok, you can be sure to report the second coming and get
the early warning system.
Yeah, exactly. Give them a 24-hour notice.
Let's see, the Jesus Early Warning System, JEWS.
Choose.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. I think there's something to be created from that.
That's right. This is a moment of inspiration. Who knows? Maybe a spirit helped me think that up just now. You never know.
And you saw it here.
That's right here.
You heard it on this show. Yeah.
The Jewish early warning system, the Jesus early warning system, was invented on Latter Daily Digest and Midlife Revolution, because hopefully Megan will show this part too. So Randy, thanks for all your stories. I'm sure we're going to have more. Course. And then, and I know that when your book comes out, we'll have you on again to talk about the making of the book and everything like that as a Latter Daily Digest experience. And so
I look forward to that.
That's right. So again, once more, like, share, and subscribe, and have a great rest of 2025. Bye-bye.
Bye.